Wanted to begin by telling you, first of all, that we will have 4 more classes in 4 successive weeks, unless some emergency arises, and that will complete the course as such. We will, as I've mentioned before, have something going on after that in the way of Wednesday night firesides, but they will be less formal. I may or may not have slides and so on, but the intention of those will be to discuss the various, to go in depth on some Baha'i concepts, particular concepts, such as why is there a physical reality if we are essentially spiritual beings destined to spend the rest of our lives in a spiritual environment. Why did God think it a good idea to have us go through an experience that seems almost contradictory or deleterious to our goal to become spiritual beings by tempting us or having us tempt ourselves with desires for sensual delights and achievement of power in the eyes of others and so forth. So that sort of thing, that we'll begin with that one because it'll be going more or less in the order of books I have written on these subjects. So the 4 classes will be, that remain will be, first one next week will be on completing the administrative order. Then the 81st class will be on the reviewing the plans, the teaching plans, particularly focusing on the things that have occurred from 1996 until the end of the present 9-year plan. Then the 82nd class will go over the events that we can derive from the writings that must needs occur before we attain the lesser peace. Something one of you requested some classes ago, and then we'll conclude with trying to envision from the works of Shoghi Effendi in particular, what will be the basic or fundamental nature of society once we attain the golden age, the world order of Baha'u'llah. How will it be distinct? Well, it's not hard to imagine how it'll be distinct from what we experience now, but how will it be further distinct from what we will experience during the lesser peace? So that will conclude our courses that began so long ago. Tonight, we're going to go a little longer simply because I have some slides that take a while to go through, but also because I'm going to include a recording from the National Convention of the United States in 1960, when they discovered, this was only a day or 2 days after they had discovered that Mason Remey, hand of the cause Mason Remey, had defected and declared himself guardian. So we'll go into that in some detail, but we'll also hear the announcement to the delegates by the chairman of the convention, Bora Cavalin, the fact of his defection. Just a second again. We've got other people coming in. Okay, just a second. Participates. The guardian, Abdul Baha in the Will and Testament, of course, established the institution where the hands would elect from their number a group that would have various capacities, which he outlined in the Will and Testament. Among them was the approval of the selection of the guardian for his successor. Of the guardian in pointing the hands, my point here is simply that they were, as I said last time, not from some select class, either socially or economically, whether male or female, whether of high rank or low rank, or even of particular kind of education. They were well representative. But the cause was, if you will, in the hands of ordinary individuals who were extraordinary in their dedication to the faith and in their service. The guardian, of course, so you have this kind of timeline insofar as how this succession of authority goes to this point where everything seems very fragile. Now, as I said last time, I became a Baha'i during this period, and I wasn't aware that there was anything fragile about it. But then the guardian had already passed when I became a Baha'i in 59, early 60. So in 1921, of course, the guardian was appointed by the will and testament of Abdu'l-Baha. You have the first teaching plan by the guardian, the first 7-year plan in 37, the second 7-year plan in 1946. The individual hands are appointed in 1951, the first contingent. Well, this wasn't a contingent. These were just individuals, Rahia Khanum, Paul Haney, and a few others. Then you have the first contingent later that year were appointed. This is a group of hands. You have the first International Baha'i Council appointed by the guardian. Now, this becomes very important. This is supposed to be a group that had advisory capacity appointed by the guardian as prefatory to 9 individuals who were if forerunners, as the guardian put it, of the House of Justice. But they weren't elected, they were appointed. And Mason Remey was president of this group. The second contingent of hands was appointed in 52, and then in 53, the 10-year World Crusade begins. Now, this is important because you have the guidance of what should be done by the authority of the guardian till 1963. In other words, there was no question what was to be done. It was in the hands of the guardian, or the guidance of the guardian. In 1954, Shoghi Effendi instructs the hands to appoint auxiliary boards for protection and propagation to assist them in their duties. The hands appoint members to 5 auxiliary boards corresponding to the 5 continents, because these were the hands were appointed to serve in particular continents. In the same way, now you have the continental boards of counselors. So you have boards of counselors in each continent. In 1957, the last contingent was appointed. And as you recall, I told you about this, that they were appointed only a month before the guardian passed in November. They were appointed in October of 57. So the guardian passes, but he, in his these instructions appointing the last contingent, he used the word custodians and chief stewards, and these were the terms that carried such weight insofar as the Israeli government was concerned, and enabled the hands of the cause in the Holy Land as the 9-membered body of hands elected from among all of the hands. Now, this is not the same as the international board. These are the chief stewards, the hands of the cause in the Holy Land. In 57, then the custodians elected this body that I'm talking about from among their hands, according to Abdu'l-Baha's guidance in his will and testament, where he asked the hands to elect a 9-membered body from among them. The first International Baha'i Council was then elected. Now, remember, this body already exists, but it was appointed by Baha'u'llah. Now, in prefatory to and in preparation for the election of the House of Justice, the first International Baha'i Council was elected this time. Then in '63, the Universal House of Justice is elected. Now, the Universal House of Justice then made the decision that auxiliary board members could no longer serve on LSAs or NSAs. And then the House of Justice announced what was obvious because of the will and testament of Baha'u'llah, of Abdu'l-Baha, that no new hands could be appointed, even as no new guardian could be appointed. So the Universal House of Justice begins the process of appointing continental counselors to assume the function of the hands. And the hands, that are of course growing fewer in number, are utilized to serve in whatever capacity they can to assist the cause. But you have the counselors taking the place of their function of protection and promulgation of the cause. So then the counselors themselves choose the auxiliary board. Now, you had in total 13 hands of the cause that served as custodians between November 1957 and the establishment of the Universal House of Justice in 1963. And this is a list of all of them. Notice prominently Mason Remey was among them. These custodians worked diligently to it, and not all at the same time. In other words, there weren't. Some of them would be on the 9-membered body, and then it would change as members deceased or became no longer capable of serving. These custodians worked diligently to aid the Baha'i world in fulfilling the goals of the 10-year crusade launched by Shoghi Effendi in 1953. Which involved establishing new Baha'i communities, building Baha'i houses of worship, and translating Baha'i literature into many languages. They called the International Convention to elect the Universal House of Justice, and possibly being the most famous living Baha'is in the world at that stage, and as I've said this before, it's extremely important, they declared themselves one and all ineligible for election to that supreme governing body. And these are those individuals. You can see there are 12. Remey is not listed here because he defected, and so it would be inappropriate to put him here. So you may be familiar with most of these. Remember, we talked about Mushlegel because he was a physician who was the one who helped prepare Shoghi Effendi's body for interment. Of course, Riyah Khanum, the wife of the guardian. And then Abu Qasim Faizi, very important because he is going to be the one you'll hear later in the program who was sent to the French National Spiritual Assembly to help them because 5 of their members had sided with Mason Remey insofar as his declaration that he was the next guardian. We're going to look at the logic that Remey used whereby he made such a claim, and you can see how weak the argument is, but nevertheless, some of those who had instigated this claim of him, such as Joel Marangella, were on the French Assembly. Hand of the Cause Faizi went there, and very astute, very an incredible man, probably one of the most educated and most daring among the hands of the cause in many senses. He had taught in Arabia and was extremely intelligent. At any rate, he straightened things out with the French National Assembly. We can discuss that later. So these are the functions. We've gone over this before, so we won't spend much time on this. The guardianship functions in twin capacities, administrating the faith. As I said last time, you have three individuals with whom the twin duties of administrating and teaching were vested in them alone, before you have the twin institutions of the guardianship and the rulers or the elected administrative bodies. So the guardian served in both capacities. He was the administrator and he was head of teaching. He devised the 10-year World Crusade. He was construction foreman, guided, helping the pillars, the NSAs, which were the pillars in the sense that they were the electors of the House of Justice. He translated the holy text, he interpreted the text, and the last individual or institution with this capacity from here until the end of this dispensation. He provides instructions for all administrative processes, how to elect an assembly and so forth. He oversaw the creating of the constitution of the bylaws of the LSAs and so forth, and the NSAs. The election, how to conduct meetings, overseeing the devising of bylaws in the Constitution. His guidance, the guardianship by itself, remains. So in other words, there is no individual guardian, but there are, of course, we still have the guardianship. Everything he did still maintains, and that is the thousands of letters he wrote that are compiled in English, and those that are in Farsi, in Persian, are being translated into English for us to read those as well. So we'll have access to letters he wrote in English there. And of course, there are other collections of letters he wrote to other NSAs, to Alaska, to India, to Australia, and so on. The function of the hands or duties of the hands of cause: to teach and inspire the teaching of the cause, to assign to various, they were assigned to various continents and regions. They had the second duty of protecting the cause. They were to respond to those who might try to cause a breach in the government or attempt to disrupt the cause. They elected a body from among their numbers. They elected a body of 9 members who were the first International Baha'i Council that were appointed, as we said, by the Guardian. And then they formed the Custodians, the body of the Custodians, which was the forerunner to the House of Justice. Excuse me, that's wrong. I'm a little befuddled here. They formed the body of the Custodians, who guided the cause until the election of the House of Justice itself. They also oversaw the election of the International Baha'i Council when it was elected, since it could no longer be appointed by the Guardian. While they did not need to approve the succession, they play a crucial role in the transition from the Guardian to the election of the House of Justice. They are designated the chief stewards of the cause for legal purposes. They are the custodians of the cause during the interregnum. They begin establishing the long-term institutions of the learned in Baha'i, that is, to teach and protect. First with their own auxiliary board members who assist them. That should be own instead of on. As their numbers dwindle, the Board of Counselors assume their functions, as we mentioned already, to teach and protect. And then the auxiliary board members serve under the counselors, and then the auxiliary board members are given the capacity to appoint assistants. So the National Spiritual Assemblies, the duties of the secondary houses of justice: they are the electors for the House of Justice. They oversee the administration of the cause for their nation or region. And notice that's why the term secondary house of justice is going in time to be more apt than is the idea of the there being national spiritual assemblies. And we've mentioned that before. They in effect will be secondary or territorial. Their guidance for the local assemblies under their administrative guidance. They follow the guidance from the House of Justice. They protect the cause. They respond to those who would breach the covenant or attempt to disrupt the cause. They devise and implement the teaching plans for the nation or region. They consult with the continental counselors for their nation or region. Then a fourth institution, the International Baha'i Council. You had, first of all, Ruhia Khanum was on it from 51 to 61 the whole time. Remey was on it until 61. Amelia Collins, Leroy Ois, Jesse Revell, Lutfallah Hakim, Ethel Revell, Hugo Giaccheri, Ben Whedon, Gladys Whedon, Sylvia Ois. Now these, they weren't on it again at the same time. They were on 9 members at a time, so they would be elected, if you were. The hands of the cause declared themselves. Now, this is a very important thing I've mentioned several times before, that the hands of the cause declared themselves ineligible for election and requested the Baha'is not to vote for them, since the appointed institutions of the faith, of the Baha'i faith, were different in both nature and function from the elected administrative bodies. The election was concluded via postal ballot by all members of the national assemblies and regional spiritual assemblies of 1960 to 1961. All adult Baha'is were eligible for election except for the hands of the cause. The members of the elected council, now this is again, this isn't the House of Justice, but it's a precursor, it's sort of, if you will, an exercise in how they were going to elect the House of Justice. But this body has on it women as well as men, but it does not have members of the House of Justice. So Ali Nakjavani, Sylvia Ois, the wife of Leroy Ois, Charles Walcott, a very famous musician, Jesse Revell, Ian Simple, Lutfallah Hakim, Ethel Revell, Bora Cavalin, who was, as you will hear on the tape I'm going to play, the chairman of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States at the time, Mildred Monteheda, who's, we'll have to talk about her later sometime because a very important figure in many ways. And this is a picture of the group. So you have Sylvia Ois here, Charles Walcott, the Revells here, Ian Simple, Bora Cavalin, Lutfallah Hakim, Ali Nakjavani, and this is Mildred Monteheda here. And so finally, you have the election of the House of Justice, the completion of the essential framework for the world order of Baha'u'llah. Insofar as the governance is concerned, it provides infallible guidance to the Baha'i institutions and Baha'is worldwide. Now, even though they are infallible in their decisions, they do not have the ability, as we've said before, to interpret the text. You can see the distinction between these two capacities. They do have the ability to elucidate the holy text. This is explicitly explained by both the Guardian and Abdul Baha. They are entitled to implement the laws of Baha'u'llah when and where it is timely to do so. It can elucidate the text, which means to explain how they are to be applied and what they include the actions that pertain to the laws. And the Guardian and the infallible interpretations of Abdul Baha and the Guardian, that should be that, render insights about the text and their application. They instigate and oversee new translations and collections of passages and tablets on specific subjects. So when these new books come out translating the works of Abdul Baha or Baha'u'llah, and later letters translated by Shoghi Effendi, they are under the guidance and approval, the personal approval of the House of Justice. So they have authority, if you will. They are authoritative. That's why they're called authoritative translations. Teaching and the learned. They themselves are, of course, distinct as the rulers and elected. They are distinct from the teaching, but they are the ones who appoint the members of the International Teaching Center, a 9-membered body consisting of 9 counselors who guide the counselors in every continent and who oversee the teaching activities incorporated into the plans of the House of Justice. So here we come to the testing of the links in the covenant, which, as I say here, is akin to the concept of tempering steel with fire. The testing, in effect, makes the covenant stronger, because if you can compare it to athletics or developing your body or whatever. If you don't stress your body, you're not going to get stronger. If you don't test yourself spiritually, if you're not tested, you're not going to get stronger. So in a very real sense, the tempering of the covenant by the testing of the claims of Mason Remey was a very, I hate to say fortuitous because that sounds strange, but it was, in the sense that we were without the Guardian, we were without the House of Justice, we had the hands of the cause, and here is someone among them who had been a faithful believer, who had served the cause all his life. He was 87 years old. He was an incredible architect, and even some of his designs will still be used, such as the Mashriq al-Azkar in Haifa, and another one he designed for, I believe it was his design, for the house of worship that will eventually be built in Tehran. And of course, he also designed the archives building. So the principal instigators so far, as we have seen throughout this course, from the Bab to Baha'u'llah, was Mirza Yahya. From Baha'u'llah to Abdul Baha, it was Mirza Muhammad Ali, Abdul Baha's half-brother, and Mirza Badiullah, who was his cohort and also his brother. From Abdul Baha to the Guardian, you had the entire family of Shoghi Effendi, including his parents. You had Mirza Mabsorab, whom we can discuss another time at length, because what he does is interesting. He sets up his own society, philosophical society. He doesn't claim to be a successor or anything. He simply, in effect, sets up his own religion. One of the things he was against was the idea of the necessity of administrative order. They wanted the religion, but without having all these this administrative institutions. From the Guardian to the House of Justice, you have hand of the cause Mason Remey and his successors. Now, there is a URL that I will give to you that was put together for the House of Justice, called Mason Remey and Those Who Succeeded Him. There are followers of his even today, not of his, but there, I think we're on the 4th or 5th Guardian now, of those who think they are following in his stead. So here are the problems, here's the backward logic he used in order to assert his claim that he should be Guardian. We know from the will and testament of Abdul Baha that the Guardian will be president of the House of Justice for life. The appointed International Council was, as Guardian said, a precursor or forerunner of the House of Justice. Remey was appointed by the Guardian as president of that initial body prior to his election in 1961. That is, prior to the election of Mason. Excuse me, he wasn't elected in 61. He was elected before that in 60, I think. Therefore, if he was president of a body that was the precursor of the House of Justice, then should he not be the Guardian, since the Guardian was to be president of the House of Justice? So he's saying, this body, which I was president of, was a forerunner of the House of Justice. I was president of it, and since it's a forerunner, then shouldn't I be president of the House of Justice? Well, of course, what it leaves out is, or ignores, are the other requirements for the Guardian, namely that the Guardian be appointed by the Guardian, that the individual be a descendant of Baha'u'llah, and that the individual be approved by the hands of the cause. Well, none of those three things pertain, so it was impossible. As early as January 1959, Remey believed that he was the second Guardian and successor to Shoghi Effendi. According to Remey, this idea developed gradually since the first conclave of the hands and the second conclave. He warned the others that they were violating the covenant by not allowing the continuation of the guardianship. At the third conclave in November 1959, Remey refused to sign the joint statement of the hands, which was converting the International Council from an appointed to an elected body, an act that would end his position as president. He then abandoned his position, moved to Washington, and began to circulate the claim that he should be recognized as the second Guardian. And these are words of Mason Remey's. The beloved Guardian singled me, Mason Remey, out from amongst all the believers upon the earth to occupy the position of president of the Baha'i International Council. This is the only position suggestive of authority that Shoghi Effendi ever bestowed upon anyone, the only special and specific appointment of authority to any man ever made by him. Secondly, the beloved Guardian declared the Baha'i International Council to be the forerunner of and the first step towards the establishment of the House of Justice. But of course, it wasn't the House of Justice. Therefore, inasmuch as the beloved Guardian in his infallibility has thus placed me in command of the faith, he kind of leaps the other three requirements. I can do nothing but assume my place that he has given me with all the responsibilities, the prerequisites, and emoluments that go with this position. So this is the logic he used, and this is the statement he made, asserting that he should be hand of the cause. And this is the statement. I remember it when I was a Baha'i, because this is when I just first became a Baha'i. And this is a telegram, so it's in telegraphese, from the hands of the cause in the Holy Land, the Custodians, to the Continental Hands and all the National Spiritual Assemblies, April 28th, Rizwan, 1960. Deeply regret necessity inform Baha'i world hand cause Mason Remey, now asserting he is guardian of faith. This preposterous claim, clearly contrary sacred text, can only be regarded as evidence conditioned profound emotional disturbance. Call upon believers everywhere, join hands, Holy Land. Complete repudiation this misguided action. Share this message, friends. In 1960, this was, of course, during the national conventions that were taking place all over the world, where they were electing their national assemblies. So Mason Remey sent his claim to all the national assemblies all over the world, as well as local assemblies. making his claim. And so the response of the custodians was to send members of the custodians to all of the major national spiritualist national conventions they could. And so to the American United States National Convention, they sent Ruhiya Khanum and Leroy Ioas. And talks from both of them are available. I don't know if they're available online, but I have them because a dear friend of mine recorded them. And so the response of the custodians, after a brief attempt at reconciliation and some hesitation among the hands of cause, he was declared a covenant breaker by all 26 remaining hands of the cause on 26th of July, 1960. Along with anyone actively supporting his claims, almost the whole Baha'i world rejected this claim, which did not even address the requirements that the guardians be descendants of Baha'u'llah, making him ineligible, and that the appointment must be clearly confirmed by the 9 resident hands of the cause in Haifa, the custodians of the cause. And so now I'm going to play for you the recording by Bora Kavlin. So it'll take me a second to go turn this on, and hopefully you'll be able to hear it.
This is a time, friends, when once again we're called upon to demonstrate our faith, our loyalty, and our devotion to the covenant of Baha'u'llah. Many of you know that only 2 days ago, a proclamation was issued by Mr. Mason Remey, revered hand of the cause, who in the 87th year of his life, after a lifetime of devoted service to the faith of Baha'u'llah, has declared himself to be the second guardian of the Baha'i Faith. When our National Assembly received this shocking information, we immediately cabled the revered hands in the Holy Land. And in the meantime, inasmuch as we had learned that this proclamation had been disseminated among the local communities and among other individual believers, your National Assembly took steps to reassure all of the local communities. I will read you first the message we received from the hands of the faith in the Holy Land, dated April 26. Have received proclamation from Mason Remey. Understand copy sent your assembly. Stop. Deeply regret extraordinary evidence, emotional perturbation. Stop. Before taking any action whatsoever, consult our representative, Ruhiya Khanum. Stop. Confident, every test releases outpouring spiritual strength, ensures greater victories. Signed, Hands Faith.
This next slide is very touching because, as you see, they said emotional perturbation. Well, the question is, he's 87 years old. He's served the faith with incredible dedication. Was this merely an act of someone who's losing it, who is going through some initial stage of dementia or what? Or was it a very conscious and deliberate act. I'll let you do your own studies and of that and decide for yourself. It doesn't matter. The fact is what he did had to be rejected, and they had to assume he was doing it especially after they consulted with him and pleaded and tried to help him. They had to take action. Specifically because this was precisely the remedy that Abdu'l-Baha in the Will and Testament calls upon the hands to do. That is their job. Should someone against the cause, they must be removed from the cause. This is in the Will and Testament itself. Now, this is a letter that was sent a few days later from the hands of the cause in the Holy Land to Mason Remey. For your, dear Mason, for your information, we quote below the text of a cable sent by the hands in the Holy Land to the Continental Hands and all national assemblies. And I won't read that because we just read that. Before their departure for Canada and the United States, Ria Khanum and Mrs. Collins participated in the decision to take this action, making it unanimous. With heartfelt regret, faithfully yours, hands of the cause in the Holy Land. So, we can talk about this more in the Q&A if we have. We may not have time for the Q&A tonight, we'll see. But suffice it to say that insofar as the Baha'i community was concerned, and as I say, I was part of the Baha'i community at that time, it was largely done away with. There were followers of Mason Remey who continued. They were in the United States. They moved to certain areas. I think one was in New Mexico and so on. And so there were a handful of followers that continued and still exist. And this link that I will share with you about what happened following Mason Remey, who succeeded him as the second guardian, the third guardian, and so on. If you want to know more about it, there's no secrecy about it. It's very easy to find it out again. You can simply go on Wikipedia and find out. So the election was held. It was determined that women, that by the men of the House of Justice, Baha'u'llah meant men. This was determined by the House of Justice after going through the various statements by Abdu'l-Baha and the Guardian. And you had some 51 national spiritual assemblies, 288 members of which were actually present at the election. My brother, as I said, was one of them from the Swiss National Spiritual Assembly. But ballots were received from all 56 national assemblies in existence at the time, and those who were present. The election itself was held in Haifa, and of course there were no edifices, Baha'i edifice, sufficiently large to hold such a number of people. So it was held at the home of Abdu'l-Baha. And then of course, the World Congress celebrating this was in April of '63. Excuse me, the election was in '63, and then you had the World Congress. These are the members of the First National Spiritual Assembly. And again, I won't go over their names, but the names are available online. The first World Congress was held in London, in Royal Albert Hall. Approximately 6,000 Baha'is attended. It was called to announce and present the election of the first Universal House of Justice, elected by participation of over 50 national spiritual assemblies. Inakalinga, last of the named hands of the cause, chaired the main meeting of the Congress. And as I say, I have recordings that we can, after our course is over, maybe we can listen to some of those because they're rather remarkable. This is a picture of the event. I did not go. I wish I had, but I did not. I know many of my friends did. So over 6,000 people. Then you have a decision, one of the first decisions taken by the House of Justice, but not the first, but one of the first. And of course, these are infallible guidance of the House of Justice. We, the universe, and they studied the writings. They looked to see if there were any conceivable way there could ever be another guardian. And so this decision says not only that there is no further guardian, but there can never be another guardian, but the guardianship remains. We, the Universal House of Justice, wish to share with you the text of the following resolution, the resolution of the House of Justice. After prayerful and careful study of the holy text, bearing upon the question of the appointment of the successor to Shoghi Effendi as guardian of the cause of God, and after prolonged consultation, which included consideration of the views of the hands of the cause of God residing in the Holy Land, the Universal House of Justice finds that there is no way to appoint or to legislate to make it possible to appoint a second guardian to succeed Shoghi Effendi. So not only was there no way to do it, there was no way that they could create some law whereby it could be done. They couldn't very well, of course, change the infallible guidance and the will and testament of Abdul Baha, which was binding. So one more slide, one or two, and then we're finished. In recent years, advertisements have occasionally appeared in newspapers in various countries, placed by the covenant breaker Joel Bray Marangella, who at the time of Remey's claim was on the French NSA, seeking to revive his claim to be the third guardian of the faith. Now, this is from 1997. This activity could provoke questions among the friends, especially those unfamiliar with the developments associated with the actions of Mason Remey, who broke the covenant by proclaiming himself the successor to Shoghi Effendi as guardian. The Universal House of Justice has therefore directed us to send you a copy of a document containing background information on these developments entitled Mason Remey and Those Who Followed Him, which was prepared for its file some years ago. You are free to use it now or in the future in any manner circumstances may require to provide the friends with the facts it contains. And here is the URL link to that entire document. It's extremely interesting. So I have this as sort of a personal comment about all of this. I mean, it's not by me, it's in the will and testament. But the title of the slide is my idea, and that is, you can't say that there are degrees of infallibility. So this is something important to note, that you can say, well, Baha'u'llah was most infallible, and then Abdul Baha was next in line, and then the guardian was under him, and then the House of Justice. No, there are no degrees of infallibility. Something is infallible or it is not, meaning it is without error. And in the will and testament, he says, the decisions of the House of Justice, freed from all error, the source of all good and freed from all error. And so this is extremely important, that the House of Justice was elected according to the process that had been established by Abdul Baha in the Will and Testament, and correctly so, and so their decisions. And may I say that includes their teaching plans that emanate from them. It's not only decisions about particular legal matters. As you point out with many quotations, Shoghi Effendi repeatedly has stressed the inseparability of these two institutions. Whereas he obviously envisaged their functioning together, it cannot logically be deduced from this that one is unable to function in the absence of the other. During the whole 36 years of his guardianship, Shoghi Effendi functioned without a universal House of Justice. Now the universal House of Justice must function without the guardian. But the principle of inseparability remains. The guardianship does not lose its significance nor position in the order of Baha'u'llah merely because there is no living guardian. We must guard against two extremes. One is to argue that because there is no guardian, all that was written about the guardianship and its position in the world order, Baha'i world order, is a dead letter and was unimportant. The other is to be so overwhelmed by the significance of the guardianship as to underestimate the strength of the covenant, or to be tempted to compromise with the clear text in order to find somehow, in some way, a guardian. That's a message in 1963 as well. I'm going to stop at this point. I've got 2 more slides, but this one I have to read because this is very important. Because it applies both to Shoghi Effendi and the House of Justice. And that is to say, well, the House of Justice is not infallible about everything, or the guardian wasn't infallible about everything. He was just infallible about a specific Baha'i, interpreting the text in Baha'i matters. Well, what else did he talk about? Well, nothing. It is not, and so here is a statement by the House of Justice, which regards the guardian and itself. Excuse me, it was originally stated by Shoghi Effendi, but the House says it applies to them as well. It is not for individual believers to limit the sphere of the guardian's authority or to judge when they have to obey the guardian and when they are free to reject his judgment. Such an attitude would inevitably lead to confusion and to schism. The guardian being the appointed interpreter of the teachings, it is his responsibility to state what matters which, affecting the interests of the faith, demand on the part of the believers complete and unqualified obedience to his instructions. This is a clarification on the infallibility versus the omniscience of the House of Justice. The exclusive sphere of the Universal House of Justice is, quote, to pronounce upon and deliver the final judgment on such laws and ordinances as Baha'u'llah has not expressly revealed. Apart from this fundamental difference in the functions of the twin pillars of the order of Baha'u'llah, insofar as the other duties of the head of the faith are concerned, the Universal House of Justice shares with the guardian the responsibility for the application of the revealed word, the protection of the faith, as well as the duty to ensure the continuity of that divinely appointed authority, which flows from the source of our faith, to safeguard the unity of its followers and to maintain the integrity and flexibility of its teachings. However, the Universal House of Justice is not omniscient. Like the guardian, it wants to be provided with facts when called upon to render decisions. And like him, it may well change its decisions when new facts emerge. And this is the paradigm, the graph I've showed you before of what we end up with insofar as the structure of is concerned. Well, we went way over time because of initially the interference of those who were trying to disrupt us, but do not let that disturb you, my friends.